get this figured out. You guys said you'd get on the phone with me today and figure this out. This is ridiculous. All right, session 2. Why did Josephus consider himself, in some sense, to have the gift of prophecy? What did you say, Caleb?
Because he's able to tell stuff and prophesy.
Yeah, certain historical events he was able to accurately anticipate. All right. He had also made the prediction to Vespasian about becoming emperor, regardless of his motive for doing so. That did actually come true. But it also mentioned in there that apparently that wasn't the first or only time that he made a prediction that came true. All right, so apparently there were a number of different times where it appeared that a prophecy made by him came true. And therefore, you can understand why he would think that that was a sign that he had the gift of prophecy. The test in the Old Testament that was given for determining whether or not a prophet was a real prophet or not was whether or not their prophecies came true, right? If none of their prophecies come true, then you could assume that they weren't actually a prophet, right? Number 2, why did the Romans even consider that Josephus could possibly be prophetic, even though he was a Jewish general who did not believe in the Roman religion? Yes? All right, they interviewed other people besides just Josephus. They interviewed other prisoners that they had captured and found out that he had been predicting Vespasian would become emperor for a while. He didn't just make it up right now. And Vespasian obviously would want to believe the prediction, so he began to regard him as a prophet. This would not be a problem for the Romans because they have many gods, so they're always open to a new one and would have no problem with a Jew being a prophet, right? They'd just add another believer and another believer, or another god and another god to their list. Okay? Let's see if I can text these two and see if I can get them back in the meeting here. Oh, here comes Cosette's back in now. So. Number 3. After Vespasian questioned the other Jewish soldiers about Josephus's prophecy, what happened? Yes?
They agreed about it.
They agreed what?
About it and that it was true.
Okay, and so what did he start doing toward Josephus? How did he start acting toward him? Kind, yes, that's the key factor. Once he had questioned the other prisoners and discovered that, hey, maybe this guy actually does have the gift of prophecy, then from that point on, he started treating him kindly and taking care of him. Okay? Number 4, later in the text, you will read that a rebel leader, John of Gischala, asserted to Josephus that he did not fear capture by the Romans because Jerusalem was God's city. But Josephus responded, It is God himself who's using the Romans to purge his temple with fire and to exterminate a city so choked with pollution. Was this prophecy of Josephus true? Absolutely, yes. In one sense it was true. It is true in the basic sense that God did in fact use the Romans to judge Jerusalem. The reason that it's not completely accurate is he was talking about something a little different as the pollution that it was clogged with. He was talking about the people fighting with each other and not following the rules of God and all this different types of things here. What he should have been talking about, if he wanted to be accurate, was the fact that they were not recognizing Jesus as the Savior. That's the reason that they're going to be judged. Okay? All right, so these questions didn't have to be written down, but you should be ready to discuss some of them. What is the current Western view of prophecy? In other words, does our modern day society believe that prophecy still occurs? Huh? You say no? Does anyone disagree? What do you think?
Like in the world, people go to fortune tellers, media and stuff like that, and horoscopes.
Fortune tellers, horoscopes, those are forms of prophecy, right? I mean, people still think there's some secret way to find out what's going to happen, right? They're still looking for that, even if they don't 100% believe it. Some people do it just for fun type things. Anyone that's ever read a fortune cookie or a horoscope knows that they're so general that you can always find a way to have them come true. I mean, we live on a planet with 7 billion people, and your fortune cookie says, you'll meet someone new today. Really? That's I mean, pretty unique that you could identify. I'm going to run into a person I don't know at Walmart. I mean, if you were in an Amish community, that might be something that, you know, carried a little more weight because you know everyone in the community, but not living in our modern view. So modern astrology, seances, fortune tellers, those types of things would be things that would be similar to that. What is the biblical view of prophecy? Well, obviously, a biblical prophet is sent by God to proclaim a message. Who was the first prophet from the scriptures? Who's the first person that we really hear of prophesying? Yeah.
God.
Okay, if you want to say God, obviously told the first prophecy in the garden in there. But then from that time on, there's no mention of one particular person saying things about the Lord until this dude comes along. Wrote the first 5 books of the Bible down for the Lord. Moses was the first great prophet that kind of came along, right? Moses was the first one that came along and gave prophecies in a major type way. The way that you could tell if a prophet was true or not is, first of all, they could not speak against anything that was in the scriptures, and secondly, what they said had to come true. Right? Moses pointed and spoke of a prophet to come who would be greater than himself in Deuteronomy 18. This prophet that he was speaking of is our prophet, priest, and king, Jesus. All right. So, moving on to session 3. What are factions? Question to consider. What is a faction? Yeah.
People that have similar ideals that will usually turn to further those ideals.
Okay, so a faction is from the main group of the populace, a subgroup that has a certain set of ideals that they hold to very strongly and try to further. All right? Are factions good or bad? Depends on what they're trying to further, right? Depends on what they're trying to further and how stubborn they are about trying to accomplish this. Factions, in other words, differences of opinion on things, can bring diversity and can be a good thing. All right, they can bring unique points of view, help people to think of things in other ways, and so on and so forth. However, it can be bad when a group that should be unified is split into factions and doesn't accomplish anything. This is kind of what we see in the United States right now, right? We kind of see 2 groups that are so far separated from each other that there doesn't seem to be a middle ground for them to arrive at any sort of consensus. All right, and then it's bad. What were the three factions of the Jews in the first century? These have different worldviews referenced in Josephus and the Bible. So what are the three groups that were mentioned in here? We talked about them a little yesterday.
Essenes, Pharisees, and Sadducees.
Okay, Essenes, Pharisees, and Sadducees. The Essenes could also be called another word. Zealots. All right, Essenes could also be called zealots. Now, could you have a zealous Pharisee? A Pharisee who's very zealous for the Pharisaical practices? Yes, you could. A zealot generally means somebody who is a little radical in the pursuit of their ideals. All right? And so you sometimes can think that these people maybe take things too far sometimes, or it can be a good thing if they're being zealous for the right things. If they're being zealous for their love for the Lord and will not compromise that no matter how they're tortured, that can be a good thing. All right, so the Essenes were also sometimes called the Zealots. Who were the three main rebel leaders? This will be on the test, as well as you have to know those three factions. Who were the three main rebel leaders who organized the different factions of rebels according to Josephus? And this is on the test, so you got to memorize this, so hopefully you got these right. Athen, what did you get for the three main rebel leaders?
Eliezer, then Simon, John Scala, and Simon Bar.
There you go. So there's Eliezer, however you say that, son of Ananias. There's John of Gischala, and there's Simon Bar Giora. So I'm going to write these up here because you need to make sure that you've got these. So if you didn't already have these down, make sure that you get these. I think Bar means son of, so I think it's Simon, son of Giora. I think it's another way of saying that, but that's how he wrote them down. All right, so these are three very important people that pop up as leaders of these different factions. All right. All right, so Eliezer, son of Ananias, John of Gischala, Simon Bar Giora. This guy was a real class act. All right, we'll get to one of the things he did here in just a minute. According to Josephus, how did the leading men and people who favored peace respond to the taking over of the temple by the zealots and radicals? All right, so there were people that favored peace, but then the zealots take over the temple, and how did they respond to this? Did they just go, huh? All right, I guess they've got the temple. Well, I'm getting no volunteers at all, so I'm going to Sheila.
Seized the upper city.
Yeah, they seized the upper city, and then they fought for 7 days with the radicals who controlled the temple and the lower city. All right, this will give you an idea of how messed up the Jews were at this time. They were so messed up, in fact, that while they should have been concentrating on uniting against Rome, they're fighting each other at the same time as Rome is getting ready to besiege the city. I mean, this is sad. This would be like if the United States got attacked by Russia and Texas decided that would be a good time to secede from the Union, and several other states attacked each other as well. I mean, it's just stupid to do that. That's a sure sign that you're going to collapse as a country. From the reading of the Worldview essay, what factions developed that nearly destroyed the Roman Empire itself in 69 AD? So this is after the death of Nero, during the year of 4 emperors. There were 4 emperors in 1 year's time, because one came to power, kill him, next one came to power, kill him, 4, yeah.
A bunch of generals all wanted the emperorship.
Yes. All right, so there were factions that promoted different generals to be the emperor that developed throughout the empire, which caused repeated civil wars. All right, so these people, you've probably heard of some of them before. There's Galba, Otho, Vitalis, and Vespasian. Vespasian, of course, is the one that comes out on top finally at the end of it all. But during this time, they were just slaughtering each other left and right, fighting over this. Are there factions in our modern world who have fought against each other both literally or figuratively within the recent past? Well, Republican and Democrats, right? That's a real big group there. In the past, we were much more divided on the race lines than we are nowadays. We're still working toward getting complete equality and so forth in there. But if you go back to the 60s, you guys probably think when you read these stories, these Rosa Parks and stuff like this, that this is ancient history and all that. My dad grew up in Dallas, and when my dad grew up in Dallas, the public buildings still had coloreds only and whites only bathrooms and drinking fountains, because Lord forbid you drink out of the same drinking fountain. That was in my dad's lifetime. It's not that long ago that all this stuff was still going on. We've come a long ways. Yes, there's still some work to be done in certain areas, but we've come a long way with that. But you can think of those types of factions. That's in recent history that we have those types of things. Now we've got pretty strong division where a lot of people are not, they're not overly fond of Muslim people, because they associate that anyone that is a Muslim has to be a radical terrorist, right? So there can be some antagonism between groups like that as well, right? So you can see a lot of this stuff. Yes. Yes. Yeah, the Jewish war that he's writing about here took place in the 60s, and Jesus died in about 33. At the same time. It's all going on at the same time. Okay, because remember we just said Nero just died, and that's where these 4 emperors came in. Nero just died, which means Nero, who was a great persecutor of the Christians, Nero, who did all kinds of cool things you get to read about in the next chapter. Nero, who decided, hey, I like having late night parties, but we've got to have light for the late night parties. So take these Christians, dip them in pitch so they won't burn as fast, and light them on fire as torches in my garden. Yeah, he was a great guy. Nero's a real winner. All right. All right. What does the book of James tell us about conflicts and fighting within the church? Bad, right? Shame on us. We shouldn't be fighting within the church. Now, does that mean if somebody starts doing false doctrine for the sake of peace, we don't tell them to stop? Is that what that means? Did Jesus put up with false doctrine? Did the early disciples put up with false doctrine? No. Obviously, we have to confront false doctrine. But should it split the church that one group wants red carpet and the other wanted blue? No. Sometimes we just need to chill about stuff. Okay? Sometimes we just need to chill out about things and not make everything into a federal case. Just because I happen to like traditional music played by the organ for church, anywhere in the scripture does it say, and thou shalt use the organ only in thy worship?
Yes.
No, it doesn't. It says that your worship should be orderly and so on and so forth. And so to sit there and try to mandate some of those things and cause splits in the church is bad. We have to hold to things like if somebody says Jesus didn't rise from the dead, I'm sorry, we can't just say, well, for the sake of peace, let's just say that's okay. We can't do that, right? Because that's the cornerstone of our faith. All right, session 4. When Vespasian marched his troops to Caesarea after capturing Jotapata, who did the Caesareans loudly demand be punished and why? Caesareans. Yeah. Josephus. All right. Why? Because the Caesareans were pro-Roman. They did not want these zealots fighting. And by the way, that's what Josephus was. Josephus was a zealot to start with. He was a general of the rebels. Like Han and Luke. He was a rebel general. And so when they arrived there, they said, punish him. If he and these other generals hadn't been causing problems, the Roman army wouldn't be here taking everything that we have. When the people of Jerusalem heard that Josephus had surrendered to the Romans, how did they react? Remember, everyone in his group made a suicide pact, and all of a sudden he's still walking around, so what did they think of him, Atit?
He's cursed and a traitor.
A traitor and a
Coward.
coward, yeah. And a wuss, right? They did not like him at all. What was the name of the Jewish rebel leader based in Tarakia, however you say that? Jesus. Remember, I told you, Jesus was not that uncommon of a name for people to sit there and say, well, he's the only one ever. No, Jesus means God saves, right? And it's the Old Testament or the New Testament version of Joshua. Lots of people name their child that in the hope that he was going to be the one that saves, right? So it's pretty common. So a certain Jesus was a rebel leader based in this city. How did Titus surprise and overtake this city after he learned that the rebels and town people were fighting and arguing amongst themselves? This shows you what a bunch of idiots they were. Yes?
He just rushed in.
He just rushed in. All right, so he finds out that they're fighting each other, so he leaped onto his horse and led his troops into the town in a surprise attack. The Jews on the ramparts gave up without a fight, while many who advanced to the lake were killed by the advancing Romans. In the town, there was mass slaughter until Titus, having punished the guilty, took pity on the remaining people and stopped the massacre. All right, so he could have killed the whole city. So basically, he hears that they're fighting inside, and he's like, well, this is stupid. If they're going to fight each other, let's just rush the walls right now and take over. To where did the Jewish fugitives and the initial people from that T city run, and what did the Romans do as a result? Where did they run? Let's go to Slade.
They fled across the lake, and then the Romans built rafts to pursue them.
Okay, the lake being the adjacent Sea of Galilee, so they went across boats on the Sea of Galilee. So the Romans did what then?
They built rafts.
They built rafts to pursue them, from which they attacked, boarded the Jewish vessels, and killed them from the rafts with arrows or long lances. Okay, so this is how bad the Jews obviously failed at life compared to Romans. They have boats that get caught by rafts that the Romans quickly put together and slaughter. So they have actual boats that are supposed to be seaworthy, ready to go out on there. The Romans just throw together some rafts and somehow catch them. Now that's either because they were really bad and the Romans were really good, or it's because God was visiting his wrath on his people at this time. After taking control of the city, how did he brutally trick the surviving rebels? All right, so the people, after he took control of the city, the surviving rebels were granted amnesty and allowed to go to the next town, Tiberias. But when he comes to Tiberias, what does he do? So he didn't really grant them. All right, he comes in there. He summons everyone to the stadium and puts to death 1,200 people that he considered to be old and unserviceable. And then he picks the 6,000 best young people and sends them to Emperor Nero. Oh boy. I don't even want to think what happened to them if they got sent to Emperor Nero. Nothing good, for sure. And then the rest, over 30,000, were sold as slaves. So he didn't really grant them amnesty, he just granted them a reprieve until the next city. All right. So he let them run on, and then when he came to the next city, to Tiberias, he sold them as slaves, or killed them, or sent them to Emperor Nero. 7. When Vespasian advanced on the town of Gamala, who tried to persuade the people of the city to surrender, and what happened when he did? King Agrippa. All right, what happened when he tried to? He walks up to the walls, and what happens?
The city fell.
Huh?
The city fell.
No. The city eventually falls, but what actually happened? He walks up to the walls, and he's calling out to him, and someone chucks a stone off the wall, right? Someone chucks a stone and hits him in the right elbow. All right, so he goes up and tells the people, my people, there's no point, you should surrender, and somebody chucks a stone off the wall, hits him in the right elbow. The Romans were furious, and they redoubled their siege efforts as a result. How did the Roman officer Placidus trick the rebels of Mount Tabor? Yes.
No, they pretended to flee, which in turn the rebels left the high ground which they had and came onto a plain and then slaughtered.
All right. So he basically said, let's pretend like we're afraid of them and start running away. And of course, the Jews are like, oh, it's like the days of David again. They're fleeing before us. We'll slaughter them all. And when they got them out into the plain, away from the mountain, the cavalry wheeled around and slaughtered them all. Number 9, what cowardly thing did our good buddy John of Gischala give his rebels as they left Gischala under the cover of darkness to escape to Jerusalem? And this will be in the test. This is the test question. What do you do?
Leave their wives with them.
Yes, he said, leave the women and children that can't keep up. He's like, leave the women and children, we'll just take off ahead of there. And the people said, but they'll be killed. And he's like, yeah, but we'll take revenge later. It's all good. We'll take revenge later. Again, this went to the idea that a lot of people had at this time of, yes, that's true, but it's only women. It was almost that type of an attitude, where they didn't value them as much as they valued the men. So it was a sad chapter there. How did Titus react in the morning when he found out of John's escape the night before? Yes?
He went up to Gischala, and there they just let him.
Okay, he sent a squadron to pursue them. John escaped, but 6,000 of the rebels were killed, and about 3,000 women and children weren't killed, they were made slaves, which is probably in some ways worse than being killed. All right. Questions? Pastor just poked his head in for a minute, so he should be right in. Got a drink or something. David's not here to steal his water anymore, so Pastor has to remember to really something. Either that or drink one of you guys. Has he done that yet this year?
Not this year, the last year.
Last year.
Last year, definitely.
I know he did it last year for sure. What he'll do is classic. David, can you have some of your water?
Bring the water.
My David.
So, yes, we have opportunity.
He's telling them you have to remember bring your own water now because you don't have David here to drink his water.
Yeah, that's right. I know.